So we wanted to have this discussion as a celebration of autism awareness. April is World Autism Awareness Month, and the United Nations has designated that April 2nd was being Autism Awareness Day. Okay. In promotion and celebration of autism awareness, our wellness team has put together this panel discussion reflecting the perspectives, knowledge, and lived experiences of people with autism, the vocational counselors, and employers who support their integration into the workplace. Okay. The goal of the discussion is to increase the awareness of issues faced by persons living with autism in the context of employment, and so that we as vocational rehabilitation professionals can better serve these individuals. Today, I have a few takeaways or objectives that we would like to address. We would like to have some communication strategies in interacting with persons living with autism, some triggers that may cause persons living with autism to feel uncomfortable, and some strategies so that we can help them cope. As well, strategies to create social inclusion in the workplace and workplace culture for people living with autism. And to help us facilitate this discussion today, we've brought along 3 individuals to participate. We have Graziella Forbes, who is a rehabilitation counselor and job coach, approaching her 6th year with PPRC. She is working directly with the client employment sectors. Within the PPRC team, she helps clients to create employment plans, to reach their goals, and assist them in meeting employer needs. From her previous experience as teacher, curriculum developer, and trainer in second language, Graziella brings her insight and appreciation for different learning and communication approaches, which help serve both our clients and employers. Nicholas Wojitas is a landscape photographer and a car detailer. Specializes in landscape photography using single, diptych, triptych, and multiple formats. He uses a landscape as a means of expressing himself, photographing places he feels close connections to, and the ones that mirror his moods. As an advocate for mental health awareness, he creates art that documents his daily struggles with anxiety, and more recently, his experiences with autism throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. He will continue to create photographic artwork, which explores the expression of identity. PPRC featured Nicholas in a success story between himself and Enterprise in 2017. Paul Raymond Goulet, also known as Little Ray, is the founder and CEO of Little Ray's Nature Center. Since 1995, Little Ray's Nature Center has been fueled by the drive to share their passion for wildlife conservation and animal welfare, and by being fully accessible to all, regardless of financial status or special abilities. Even 26 years later, they strive to continually improve every day in all aspects of their organization, with education, welfare, and accessibility being the 3 pillars their company is built on. Okay, so the next thing is that we have prepared 3 separate questions to address communication, triggers, and workplace integration. So I'm going to go one by one with our panelists to ask the questions. And the first up is for Graziella. Okay, so Graziella, we would like you to speak on some ways that we can help to facilitate easier communication for people with autism, and we would like to be specific about workplace integration.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to check my audio because I think it's the first time I spoke. Is my volume okay? Okay, great. So thanks for the question. I'll do my best to be as efficient as possible with my esteemed guest speakers who are joining today. I'm basically very happy that I received this question because I checked in with Brittany and Joel, and people who I work with and know with autism, they're often asked to understand other people's perspectives. And I'm happy that this question is for non-autistic people to consider perspectives of a person with autism in communication. So when we're keeping in mind, first of all, that no two people with autism have the same language and social skills, whenever it comes to communicating, it's a two-way interaction. So there's the first skill is expressive when you're speaking with others, and receptive when you're understanding others. And some may have difficulty with the give and take of a conversation, so it's important to not make it complicated or confusing. But for people who are not on the spectrum, when you communicate with someone, if you don't obtain the response that you expect, you may want to pay attention to how you communicate, how you speak, how you listen, and adjust to help improve messages getting through in both directions. So the first thing I'd like to get out of the way, and I just want to share that I've shared my notes. I've received them from people living on the spectrum, and also from documents and resources that are created by people living on the spectrum for people living on the spectrum and for others. So that's really important to me. So what I wanted to get out of the way is one of the first tips is addressing the person as you would any other adult, not a child, and using their name. And this is something for our workers with, we service adults with disabilities. So don't assume that the person has limited cognitive skills because they have autism. An individual's disability may be more language-based, and they may understand every word you say. It's just there may be a difficulty in responding verbally. That's one of the first things that is like a starting point. Start with that. One of the communication tips is often ensuring that people are paying attention when you speak, but pay attention to yourself as well before giving instructions, asking questions. And this can look different for different people. People with autism have reported having difficulty paying attention to more than one sensation at a time. So some explain why eye contact can be difficult if they're trying to listen to what you're saying. So this is where they may not be looking at you. So don't expect it full time if it's not something that they're comfortable with, because it's not necessarily a means of showing they're paying attention. I have examples for all of these tips, but it would go beyond the time I've allotted for this morning because I've worked with a number of clients in French and English, and not one has been the same. We're all individuals. So for me, the paying attention for one particular client I remember was asking her to stop texting and putting away her phone when we were meeting so we can move along in the communication. And when you're delivering a message, to be aware of any environmental or sensory differences that can affect attention. Try to prevent any sensory overload, and that goes with many people, just not people on the spectrum. Engaging in conversation using interests and hobbies, and connecting and building rapport. So one of the best strategies that I use in my work and I help with in the workplace is preparing your communication and an intention ahead of time and allowing time for the communication. So when you are prepared and you're thinking about what you want to engage in, it helps keeps your sentence short, concise, and focused. And it also it provides you with an opportunity to inform the person. This is what we're going to do today. This is what I'd like to talk about. And you can, in my meetings with an employer or clients, it's like, this is what I would like to get covered. This is what we're going to do. And for example, in a meeting, we all get an agenda. So it's very similar to give people some structure and some heads up. Say what you mean what you say. Be literal, clear, and concise as much as possible. Try to avoid slang, nuances, sarcasm. It can be confusing. It's not, it can be understood. Could be very well understood. But in the workplace, we really implore employers to provide clear directions and guidelines for performing the job. So as a coach, we like people to explain what's expected. What's expected in the performance, what's the expected deadline, the outcome, the behavior, being as clear and specific as possible, show how to meet those expectations. Any unwritten rules, well, verbalize them, and be clear about consequences. And if possible, if there is a written reference for communication, it could be helpful to refer to later on. I've often heard in the workplace, I said it, I delivered the message, I told them, but my question always, was it clear? You know, how did you communicate? There have been a lot of, I've also looked at different American and Australian resources and Canadian resources, which I base my information on with the clients I work with. And remaining professional in your context of work, is pretty important. Try to avoid too familiar phrases, and there's some context, for example, like familiar terms when when you're crossing the social boundaries. If someone is making the effort to work on their social cues and boundaries, it can be very difficult and confusing when you are calling them honey or sweetie or cutie pie and these such terms that are very familiar in the workplace. And that goes as well with physical space and contact. Unexpected touch can be an additional stressor. So showing your kindness in another way, such as verbal praise, is probably a great starting point. And this is all assuming that you are going in not knowing anything about the person and where to start, right? Because as you communicate with someone, you are going to establish the best ways to deliver messages and receive them. A lot of clients have told me that they appreciate visual supports when I'm delivering any verbal communication. If you're online right now in Zoom, you can see that the closed captioning is also something that many experts in the field, like Wanda Deschamps, for example, has said that it assists people with neurodiversity and mental health to have closed captioning, nothing related to hearing or hearing loss. But for example, if you're in a workplace, a sheet, a map, a list, a form, some contextual piece of information in a visual format can help. But thanks to Linda, my first client living on the spectrum was also completely blind. So don't use the visual strategies as your only strategy, because you're going to really improve your language. So the language you use is really important for a person with autism and vision loss or blindness. They could also be used, visual supports could be used for references. I know that for my client, one of my clients, whatever question I asked, they wanted to know where the job was at. So we looked at the map first, and then that was the opening conversation for the communication about proceeding with any other questions. If you ask a question, wait for a response and take the time to listen. Don't assume that the person hasn't heard you or doesn't understand you. Just like everyone, we may all need a little more time to process the information before giving a response. And questioning, maybe start with one at a time, short, concise, necessary questions, and with options to begin with, to see how well people respond to open-ended questions that don't have a reference, especially if you're starting to get to know them. Open-ended questions may be a bit more difficult in the beginning, where the context hasn't set up in terms of what you're speaking about. So taking the time to listen lets you know that you care, but also helps you identify the best way you want to communicate with each other. So if you don't understand what the person is saying, don't pretend you do. Ask more questions to clarify what they are trying to convey, and restate your understanding. Like, this is what I'm understanding you're saying. Is that correct? And that make sure that you are on the right track. Listening to their stories, I guess, as we hear later on, will also help you identify what strategies work for the person to reduce stress and what are potential triggers. So the only way you're going to find this out is by listening to stories and asking those questions. So when you are communicating meaningful feedback, I have been told this by every person I know, personally and professionally on the spectrum, is provide meaningful feedback. In the workplace context, frequent short reviews with direct feedback on how they're doing is critical. If you need to explain that something is being done incorrectly, ensure that the problem is understood, but also direct on how to improve. So that needs to be communicated and not just expected and assumed, and not going to pull it out of thin air. Say it and make it clear. And invite the person to ask for more feedback, because everyone may be different on this level. They may want it, daily, some may want it weekly, but everyone is different. So praising and rewarding someone when something is done well, not to be overlooked as well, because we all like to know when we're on the right track. Providing this positive reinforcement can really strengthen performance, relationships, and everything for someone in the workplace. This context here, I just wanted to, just before I close off with the last two, is some adults living with autism may unknowingly communicate inappropriately in the workplace. So be prepared to provide specific feedback on what is appropriate and have a conversation about that, being honest and non-judgmental and clear. Don't avoid it. just to have that respectful conversation. And the job coaches in the workplace can assist in helping this information and share. There are so many resources available. If I listed them off, I'd have pages and pages to share about practical coaching strategies for that. But we're not talking about the person on the spectrum here. We're talking about people, making it easier for people on the spectrum. So check to make sure that you're understanding, for understanding when you're delivering a message and an explanation and feedback. You want to avoid misinterpretations. People can say things, write things in an email, and we all know that we can read that and interpret it differently. Check to make sure it's understood the way you want it delivered. And the best way to do that is to ask the person to repeat what they understood, if they are verbal, and they can repeat it back to you. And when you are listening and you want to, you may need to clarify, explain the why. So all of my clients and people I know on the spectrum like it when you explain the why. This is it. This is the way it is. Well, why is it that way? And that kind of cements a great communication technique with respect to what the person wants to know and needs to know, especially if you want to implement change or improvements in performance. I have many anecdotes, but I don't have time for anecdotes. So one thing that is my pet peeve is when people are speaking about the person as if they're not in the room. And it's easy to fall in this trap if somebody is coming with a family member or a colleague, or you're in the workplace. Just speak to the person directly, as not as if they're not in the room. And you could fall in the trap if somebody else is doing it. If they're looking at you and talking about the person, but you want to model appropriate behavior, include the person, speak to the person, and don't exclude them. And you're going to watch your body language as well, because it helps other people interpret ours with respect.
So, Graziella, if I can just, I'm going to
Yes.
move on to Nicholas now with the
Excellent.
next question about triggers. And I
Okay.
wonder if this might be a good segue from your conversation. So, Nicholas, as a person with lived experience of being on the spectrum, could you talk a little bit about what some specific triggers and strategies for coping may be? And you're currently muted, so.
Yes, yeah, that would be great. In my experience with autism, I've found that there are many factors that can lead to discomfort. And since I'm on the spectrum, I've always enjoyed routine work, and many other things routine wise, in doing things the same over and over again, knowing that what is required of me to do. But when there is a change in the workplace, when something changes, that tends to stress me out. And when this happens, I have to take a step back. I have to do some deep breathing, and I have to take the change one step at a time. I have to take it one step at a time, and that will help me to do the deep breathing and to take this change one step at a time. And I have to treat myself with compassion. I must treat myself with kindness. I have to treat myself as if I were talking to a close friend. What would I say? How would I act towards this friend with kindness? Another factor that's that causes discomfort, that's very difficult, is also when times in the workplace tend to get really busy, the work pace is much faster. And this tends to stress me out as well. And when this happens, once again, I must take a step back. I must do some deep breathing. And I must tell myself, it's okay. It's all right. You can do this. You've got this. It's okay. And once again, I must treat myself with kindness. And being in the days of COVID, we must treat each other and ourselves with kindness and compassion as well. And another factor that's really has upset me in past jobs is when, and this has happened as well in my personal life, is when I feel misunderstood. There have been times where people have misunderstood me and have gotten either frustrated, angry, or upset with me, or impatient. And this is by far one of the hardest, one of the most upsetting factors I've experienced both in professional and personal life. And when this happens, originally, many years ago, I used to think, what's wrong with me? But I have to take a step back and I have to talk to myself. I have to say to myself, they've misunderstood you. They just don't understand. People just don't understand what you're going through. And people, they don't understand that you're giving these tasks your very best effort and your very best quality. And I have to remind myself that if they did understand what you were going through, they probably wouldn't be so quick as to get upset with you. And with hardships come triumphs. I believe if we embrace our autism and it allows us to unlock these unique, special, hidden abilities. And when we unlock those hidden abilities that the average person doesn't have, we can show the world a completely different side of us, and we can blow them away. And I find I've done this with not only my photographic artwork, but with my auto detailing as well. I'm always looking to go the extra mile, whether I'm doing my art or whether I'm doing my auto detailing for a customer. I'm always looking to go the extra mile and to give my customers a more personal vehicle purchasing experience. And I'm always looking to make the customers happy. And I'm always, like I said, I'm looking to go the extra mile and exceed industry expectations. And this is something often when we do these, when we open up these abilities, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things, and these talents, we can show what we're made of. And we can do things that the average person cannot do. And let me ask you this: why be average when you can be so much more?
I like that. I like that. And then, of course, we have our third speaker here. We have Paul Goulet, who, as an employer who has integrated persons with autism into your workforce, if we could ask, could you speak a little bit about how it is that you facilitate that social inclusion and integration? I think that might be a nice segue from Nicholas's comments.
I was muted. Yeah, everyone, thank you, Brittany, so much. I am completely privileged to be here. And Nicholas, when you were talking, I was like, trying to fight back tears of just pride for you. And what's interesting is, when I go to the workplace and there's changes in my workplace, I don't like it very much either. And it causes me a great deal of stress. And I often deal with people and at times have a big team of staff, and at times will say things that are misunderstood. And I often go back and think to myself, they don't understand me, and I need to express myself differently so people understand me. And that builds on even what, sorry, my dog is barking in the background, what Graziella was saying. 95% of what Graziella was saying about how you treat staff with autism is exactly how you treat every single staff member that works in your organization. Like, when I say they're not special, they're all special, and we're all special. And if I told you that I speak to every single person in my organization the same, I simply do not. And for us, it is 26 years of establishing a culture within our organization. I remember in the beginning, we relied on some workplace programs where young men, women, individuals with a variety of special needs came in with support staff that worked with them. And I remember in the beginning, even the change within our organization, when I would say, we're going to hire this person who is dealing with this, special ability, and our staff would be, look, we are so busy, we have so much work to do. How do we, like, how can we stop? Like, when we talk about having to slow down and be more patient, and like, how can we stop when our days are so full? And it's establishing this, well, if we do stop and slow down right now, we can create these exceptional team members that can help us. And, for me now, just culturally within our organization, a month and a half ago, I hired a young man on the spectrum that I had met one time in Toronto 5 or 6 years ago. And we've been friends on Facebook, and I saw that he was struggling in Toronto to try to get back into the field of animal care. We had a part-time job. And I told my zoo director in Ottawa that I want to give this kid a job. It wasn't about him applying and even go. I said, I want to give this kid a job. And there's no more. Now it's just like, absolutely, we'll bring him on, we'll train him, and he can work for our organization. So I guess for us, we've established a culture that there's just this understanding. I mean, we currently have about 28 people between our 2 locations in Canada working for us right now. 4 of those staff members are on the spectrum, and we have 2 volunteers right now, 3 volunteers, excuse me, that come into the zoo that are on the spectrum. So for us, it's a culture thing. And I guess when I think about why more employers don't, I still think there needs to be more education. I think there needs to be a better understanding. There needs to be better support, not for necessarily an employer like me, but for employers to give people this opportunity, for them to realize what our staff know already. When we have people applying who are on the spectrum, we see their skills. And I think Nicholas said, why just be good when we can have people that are great? And these people in our organization that are on the spectrum, they are a 10. They are a 10. And yes, we treat them uniquely depending on the need and what they need as individuals. And they are no more or less perfect than the people who work for organizations that are not on the spectrum. But I will tell you, and my staff know this, if you want people who are dedicated and committed and work hard and are highly skilled, you want to hire people that are on the spectrum, and you want to invest in them. These people never call in sick for work. They are never late for work. They are there. They are on time. They are prepared. They forget nothing we tell them. And I take a great deal of pride in the journey we've been on as an organization, and not just what my priorities are in life, but to have created a culture where everybody not just are welcome, that these people contribute for our organization. And I guess just to close on that, I really hope that we continue to have programs and education seminars and everything else. And the more highly skilled people that we hire with autism who are on the spectrum, I think the more it shows other employers what great things can be accomplished. Thank you.